recruiting this week. You can see, similar to what Dave shared, that not only was there were there folks signing up from within the communities that they are within, but also we have folks from outside of Millville, Etna, and Sharpsburg signing up at least to be buddies. On a different iteration of this map, this one actually shows all 3 communities, but for our targeted mapping, we also have a feature where we're able to toggle back and forth between folks that are volunteering to be a buddy, as well as for folks who need the assistance. And the one last thing I'll share, again, credit to Dave, and this was very helpful for us, were some of the shouldering documents that are helping us kind of implement this program. To that end, you can see all 3 communities are working through this Google Doc system where we have access to folks that are signing up. We have access to the back end of the form, but then also as background checks come in, each community is able to look through the main spreadsheet and incorporate the participants from our own communities into each of these buckets. There's a communication folder for folks that are signing up to need a buddy, as those requests come in, to have emails ready to go to send to them, as well as for folks who are signing up to be a buddy. This has the email or the note that asks for the background check, as well as some supporting documents. Again, much credit to Dave for sharing the templates that we were able to build off of. Let's see if I'm forgetting to mention anything on this front. I don't think so, so I'll stop sharing my screen. But again, this is an example of work that's happening outside of the city, but borrowing from some of the city neighborhoods, collaborating. We definitely like that ethos, the sense of collaboration across borders. It made a lot of sense for us to do the same, especially with communities that we have a lot of close relationships with in partnership, and are hopeful that, you know, as we navigate through what's happening around us, we provide pathways for people to get involved and for people to be able to seek help.
Great, thank you so much, Zaheen. I'm actually, if the 3 presenters would like to open up their, they should be able to share their screens now. I would like to, there's been a number of questions that have come in, and I know that Dave has gone through and answered many of the ones on the chat screen, but I'd also like to just ask them so that that's captured. I did forget to start the recording at the beginning of this, but this question and answer part will be captured. So, if I'm going to go ahead and read these questions so that, because I think they could apply for all of you. So yeah, feel free, any one of you who wants to answer these questions. Actually, I'll stop sharing my screen so it can just, so we can see you guys and go from there. The first question is from Daniel Rossi Keene in Beaver County, who's the director of Riverwise. He said, what kind of capacity, what kind of dedicated capacity do you need to manage this? And Dave, I don't know if you want to kind of reiterate what you answered already and then let the rest of the folks answer as well.
Yeah, sure. So, you know, I think initially I underestimated how much time it would take to make these matches. One of the beauties of this system is, versus like, there's been similar systems in like Philadelphia, for instance, but they're actually managing each and every single, like, you know, if you need a grocery delivery this week, that's a separate one from your grocery delivery next week, right? So, so you're always in the middle of that. And one of the things that we were trying to do is like just match people to neighbors who can then take that on. That relationship can live for any needs that might come up. But getting it, so once we get it going, it kind of is like our hand, you know, we're done. which is nice. But it can take some time making those matches, especially because we are like insisting on doing a quick 15-minute orientation, PA criminal background checks, even though they come back instantly, tracking people down to actually complete them, can be a challenge. And then scheduling time to go through those orientations on either side. So I'd estimate, and when you think about just 15-minute orientation, that's not a lot of time. When you have 60 matches, that's 120 participants, each at 15 minutes, that starts to really add up. So I'd estimate I'm spending 10 to 25 hours of my time on top of everything else I was doing, a week managing the system. So, but that's with, several other neighborhoods engaged too. And that's also because we were, doing phone banking with, to get a lot of need. Like a lot of the other communities that aren't doing phone banking and aren't using other outreach tools for those vulnerable community members, they're not seeing the level of need come in that we did, because we just know that a lot of our folks are not online, so they're not going to be filling out that form. And phones was how we had to do it. So all that can add up. It definitely requires a little bit of time, and then with some of our partnerships like Homewood, for example, Operation Better Block, we're using our extra volunteers in Lawrenceville. So I'm handling like the volunteer side of the match, and they're handling the Homewood resident who needs a buddy. So that helps, these partnerships, as Zaheen was talking about, have created some efficiencies too. So I'll stop there.
Scott, did you have any thoughts on that as well?
So we have a lot of hands involved in this, and most of us are working full-time either on site or remotely, and it's on top of our normal daily jobs that we're still handling on a regular basis. So there are a lot of individuals. I have 3 of the 4 staff from the Department of Fire and Emergency Services tasked with the successful operations, plus the communications team, plus customer service for people to call and process those calls, plus the management of the township. So we've got a lot of people involved. There's a lot of oversight and a lot of time put into this. I agree with what Dave had to say, though, that it was completely underestimation. Once we started getting into it, it was a lot.
We haven't had our big surge of folks quite yet, but as far as our capacity that's been needed so far, between myself and one of the board officers for the Development Corporation, we've been tag teaming, updating the mapping system, and making the connections. I imagine that as word gets out further, we're going to need to spend more time on it, as Dave and Scott have shared.
Great.
And just one final point that, again, we're working with the Create Lab to shorten that amount of time. And part of our intention with working with them is that so that we can scale it and replicate that to other communities too. So again, I just want to reiterate, like, we are happy to share both our current system, but also if, like for folks who are asking for it, I'll also keep you in mind as that technology improves, and we can, we'll share it with you along the way.
Great.
Thanks, Dave.
Sure, go ahead. Did you have another? Okay, sorry. Another thing that I think is an important question as we're all navigating, really kind of changing our mission or changing what we're focused on. There was a question, any worries that you're associating your brand with a set of problems or needs that you can't possibly fully meet? Any thoughts on that? Because I know that we're all kind of wrestling with that as we deal with new responsibilities, new needs.
I think, as I had mentioned and what we had discussed, is that I think with the collaborative effort, we can find a solution to just about anything that someone needs. It isn't just me thinking about one thing. Our reach is pretty vast, including the folks that are here on this call here. I have them as resources now that I can reach out to try and find something. So I really don't have an issue with what we're doing or the forecast that we can't find or figure out an issue or a problem.
Yeah, and I'd agree with that. My view on this is if we're not responding to the needs right now, like why do we exist? Why are we a 501c3? That should be stripped away if we're not really, pivoting our work to respond to the incredible need right now. I did mention in my answer that, just it's been very, I think you'll find this in your communities too, but there's much more volunteers willing to step up than there is need, which is amazing. So we've had no problem meeting every single need, even weird things like we had a resident who believes she has COVID-19. She's immunocompromised, so she's in self-quarantine. She has an old phone that is going in and out right now and is our only lifeline to other folks. So she needed to get the battery replaced. So, and it was technical. It was like a thing. She has an old phone. They couldn't do it at the phone store. We needed somebody with the skills to be able to do that. So we've even been able to fill like things like that. And I don't know how to do that. I just sent it out to our 350 volunteers and said, hey, who can do this? And we found people to do it. So it's really just leveraging, some of the capacity that your community has already. It's not all on us to serve every single need. It's really just, tapping into an existing network. And then we call it a buddy system because it's also for liability reasons, which gets us into another question. But we're really just trying to match people who've offered a need and are requesting a need. We're not, we're trying as much as possible to minimize the amount of like subjective matchmaking that we are doing in the process. We're just the connector.
Great. I'm gonna skip around on questions a little bit just because we only have about 8 minutes left, and I think these are some. I'll try to point out some of the ones that are probably most pressing. One, Lauren Stauffer asked, "Are your orientations personalized, or would there be a consideration of creating one video going over basic topics?" I know you kind of touched on it a little bit, Dave, but if you want to maybe dig a little deeper, and if anybody else has thoughts on that as well.
So far, our orientations are me talking through it by phone, which is nice because you can hear people's hesitations, concerns, questions, right? But one way that we might, that we are looking to work with the Create Lab is to create some pre-recorded videos that could be automatically sent out to, again, just help us go to scale with it and serve more people more quickly. But it has been useful, and I think people appreciate too, like there are things in the document. We send them a document too, so they have like a physical copy of everything then I walk them through some of the highlights. And I think that just makes, you can emphasize certain points. There was a question about like setting boundaries. There are things like that I can just, I can talk through with people and really emphasize and hear their response to. And then people often have other questions too, so you can answer those. And you can kind of feel out, like it makes me feel more comfortable too, having talked to every single person that I've matched and gotten a sense of who they are and their, yeah.
Any other thoughts? Anyone else have thought on that?
And we're not doing any type of orientation session. We're giving them pretty specific instructions and breaking it up. There's limited interaction, if no interaction, with the person requesting the service. It's make the request, drop it off, and leave it at that. We are trying to limit the potential exposure of someone that the human-to-human contact, I guess you could say.
One thing that I think is a question that's definitely risen to the top, and I know it's been a concern of a number of the folks I've talked to that are doing these types of things, that is, how are you handling outreach and marketing to recruit volunteers? And even more so to get to the folks that are in need. I know that wasn't the question because I felt like it sounds like the volunteers have actually been the easier part for some of you, but if you have thoughts on both of those things.
It just takes a good campaign, really. Ours has been through, like I had said, through social media, through the website. We even sent one of our volunteers to a senior citizen mid-rise and delivered actual pamphlets in case they didn't have the internet. So we found one of those high target areas that we could potentially have an impact on and passed out pamphlets to each one of them. We have a message board in our township that we also use, that we have the message up in a very high traffic area. Not that it's a very high traffic area right now, but the message board is up. So we've tried just about every platform that we can think of on our end.
Thoughts from the other folks?
It was really easy, honestly. Social media, like I made one post on a Saturday and like people shared it like crazy. It was really one of the easiest volunteer recruitments I've ever done in 5 years of being executive director at LU.
This is an area where we need to up our game a little bit. Our outreach has been through social media primarily. We boosted our post. We posted in multiple kind of community pages. To okay response, not like Lawrenceville quite yet, but our biggest concern still is the fact that a lot of the people that are of highest need don't have internet, and we're trying to figure out exactly what we're going to be doing to be able to reach those folks as well as possible. Now, granted, we're not the only platform, not the only group to be providing aid. There are some regional organizations on that front as well. So we're hoping that people are being caught at different points of the process. But that said, working through our borough, working through our other aid providers, trying to get a list of where people are and making some more targeted outreach. To that end, we have a local church that's been handing out gift cards to our nearest grocery store, small amounts just to help people make ends meet, for folks who've kind of hit a rough spot. They're going to be sharing non-personalized data on where those folks are coming from, for us to be able to map and see if there are pockets of need that we're not seeing, and target our outreach and our services a little bit more geographically, obviously without compromising people's personal data.
And just for the outreach for folks who need the buddy too, I mean, there's some, like again, we'd used phone banking with our existing databases, but I think there's other systems you could use too. I mean, we also did, as Zaheen alluded to, like talked to all of our social service providers, our senior center, the Meals on Wheels program, the Boys and Girls Club, right? Like kind of all of our social service providers, and made sure early on, like, please share this with your clients. And can you add this in your communications as you're doing outreach? That was one way we got the word out too. And then I think there's some other, we haven't done this yet, but the other thing is once you have a bunch of volunteers, they can be used to do the outreach, right? So like one idea we've had that we haven't gotten around to yet, because we're just too busy trying to make matches, but if that ever slows down, what our idea is like create a template letter that people that are buddies who signed up, who are just sitting around because they're not matched with anybody yet, can print out and just like go, put one in every mailbox on your block, of like, hey, I'm your neighbor. If you need some support right now, we're here for you. So things like that again, like doesn't all have to be on you as the organization, and leveraging these volunteers can be one way that you also get the folks to participate.
That's great. And we had a couple people second that and say that was one of their struggles is outreach. And thanks for that advice. I think that's really good information. There's been a couple of questions, and I think you've touched on it a little bit, and you did answer one of these, Dave, in writing on the back end. So that's there for anybody who wants to see it, but that is, what about legal liability? And then somebody else asks, do you acknowledge the liabilities in this overall process? And, what have your thoughts been and conversations been around that? Anybody?
Yeah. I kind of did this on a Saturday and then had all weekend to think about, oh God, what did I just do? And then had all weekend to think about, oh God, what did I just do? I did without talking to my insurance guy. Um, so, basically what they said is like our general liability insurance policy doesn't explicitly cover it. It doesn't explicitly exclude it. So it would get settled in a court of law. God forbid one of our volunteers infects someone with coronavirus and they die. Imagining the worst case scenario, like what is the I mean, that would be awful in and of itself, but what would be the liability to the organization? Basically it's an unknown. But the fact that we do have a liability release form that we make everyone sign, and it's very hefty and long. And for people who are phone banking, we read it word for word over the phone. And if you're not willing to sign it, we can't accept you. Sorry. So that's crucial, encouraging people to wear face masks and gloves and things, just follow best practices from our health agencies, and then the orientation process, and the criminal background check. All of those things help minimize the risk, but there's absolutely quite a bit of risk that we're taking in doing this.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I have had a couple of questions that I've deferred up the chain of command for me to say, hey, I've got this great concern about the one I had spoken about was removing a tree from a yard. And I said, we got individuals that are our volunteers potentially running a chainsaw. Like, what's our liability associated with that? And my manager had said, let's just get it taken care of. We've had volunteers doing this exact job for a very long period of time, and we feel happy that we can provide this service. We're not worried about the implications on the other side. We just need to get the right thing done and make sure it's taken care of. So luckily we had it that he had a church group that's what they do a lot. They came out for natural disasters, and we contacted them and they went and took care of it within 24 hours. I just saw Bruce Fromlack chimed in on the bottom there. Hi, Bruce. And he had mentioned about churches or civic groups. And when I mentioned that we have 130 volunteers on our group, it's probably even more than that, because churches would sign up with one point of contact and they have a whole pool of people that they are pulling from as well. And I would imagine Dave and Zaheen have the same thing as well. One person signed up as a point of contact and they have a whole nother reach of group of people that are associated with it.
Yeah, that's great information. I just want to respect everybody's time. It is 3 minutes after now. If you're willing to stick around and answer a few more questions, there are a couple more that if you're able to stay for maybe 5 more minutes, we could probably get, or 5-10 more minutes tops, we could get through those. For everybody that attended and has to hop off, thank you so much for attending. This last part, I did unfortunately not record the first part of this, but everything since Zaheen has been speaking has been recorded. So we will be able to share this out with folks. So thank you. And I guess I will ask
Do me a favor.
and I think you kind of already.
The news is probably up at the
and I
Public
think
Safety Training Center.
I think you did answer this portion, Dave, on the chat, but that is if people would like, if you'd, could you share the Google form that you're using? And to that end, is there a way for us, are you willing to, could we just share it to everybody who registered for this? We had about 50 some participants register, or would you rather have them email me and share it that way? Or you have your email there. So I will make sure I share, that's the way I'll do it. I'll make sure I share your email out with folks on the webinar. And if they want to reach out to you and get it, is that okay? Yeah,
there's 2 reasons why I can't just share it to everyone all at the same time. One is because the way Google Forms is structured, you can only add like 1 collaborator to it. Well, otherwise you'll all be sharing the same form, right? So like I have to make an individual copy for each person, every new community, which is one of the reasons why this is not a very scalable technological solution right now. That's why we're working with the Create Lab. And then if you also like email me too, when we have our new system, which will not be through Google Forms, I can share that with you so that you're not using, you're up to date on a better system.
Great.
And then it's just useful for me too to track, how many communities we've shared it with.
A recommendation I can make on that front is that if you get a copy from Dave or from whomever, to then go on and make another copy of your own. Otherwise, Dave or whoever shared it with you will remain the owner, which, you know, Dave's my buddy. No problem with Dave owning any pieces of surveys that we're sharing. But, you know, for your organization, you might have concerns around personal information of your constituents. Best way to preserve control of that with a peace of mind is to make sure that you know exactly who has access to the back end of your system.
And just a quick, Scott, do you know the what backend you guys are? I know you're using SharePoint, but is that through Civic Plus, or what's your what's translating that to the website?
I wish I had the technological abilities to tell you that. I have an IT department that solves all the problems.
Okay. Just wanted to ask, just in case that was of interest to anybody. I know there are some programs out there that do forms and things like that you can put on websites, but Google Form is a great place to go. Couple other questions I just wanted to touch upon. Well, one of the things I really like about this program is that it also gives you a nice pool of volunteers for even beyond this, especially over the next year as we figure out what other issues are going to come up as we deal with that. I think that's something that is important to note. And kind of to that point, Jared had asked you, Dave, and you had answered him, but when someone signs up to be a volunteer, are they always on call, or are there certain days, hours when they've stipulated they can run errands and things like that? Do you have that kind of set up in the form?
It's part of the orientation process that we encourage them to establish that in their first phone call. So I kind of just remind both ends of the participants during my orientation that, you know, for folks who are requesting a buddy, that like, hey, many of these people still are working and have time limitations on their availability. Please respect that. And then on the volunteer side, and then we ask them like, what's a good amount of time for someone to check in on you? Is it once a week? Is it twice a week? Is it every other week? And people's needs are very wildly different. Many people are just using it as a backup. Like they have one family member who's checking in on them. And if that person gets sick, they've got nobody. So many people are just using it as a backup. So, you know, and other people are really dependent on their buddies. So we're just kind of connecting them and then encouraging them to establish that early on and set very clear expectations from the beginning. And then part of our orientation is also like, if your buddy or your match is not respecting those boundaries, let us know. And then at that point we can step in. And then we also emphasize too, because we have a plethora of volunteers, that if there are needs that come up, that it's perfectly okay to say no, right? This is about like matching people who otherwise would not have someone checking in on them to that, but it doesn't mean that they have to serve every single need. And so we very emphatically stress that it's not all on that one person to serve the every needs of this person, and to let us know if there are things that they can't or are not willing to do. And we stress that on both sides. So that's part of the orientation process.
Great. There have been a number of questions. We are going to share slides. Everybody who has registered for this, we have your email address. We captured your email address when you registered, so we'll share it that way. If for some reason you weren't the person who registered and you're watching this, you can email jprice@sustainablepittsburgh.org, and we would be all written out, sustainablepittsburgh.org, and we'll be happy to share that with you. But we should have most of your information already captured. I just want to ask, there was one more question. I'm not sure I fully understand. Nicholas asked, could this all be tied into a single program if we were getting started, save on redundancy? And I'm not entirely sure what that asked. Does that sound like?
I kind of get what you're asking, Nick. You know, what does it make sense for all of these different neighborhoods to each have their own little system? The answer is complicated. It can vary based on what your geography is. You know, whether you're one municipality, whether you're in the city and you're working across multiple neighborhoods. Just being mindful of again, what your, you know, jurisdiction might be. To that end, our system is somewhat mixed, and I imagine Dave's is similar across the different neighborhoods. We're all working with one sign-up form where we ask which community people are residing in. So the entry point is one, but then each community has the responsibility of going into the one spreadsheet, gleaning from it who has signed up from which neighborhood. If it's your neighborhood, you basically copy that information and move it over to your neighborhood's folder. That made it so that our intake process could be as simple as possible, and we could all have a sense of where the highest areas of needs were popping up. But in terms of the individual volunteer management, that responsibility still falls back on the community, on the specific neighborhood. And one of the reasons we wanted to have some sort of limitation again on geography goes back to the idea of preserving personal information as well. The bigger the geography, the more people that have their eyeballs and their mouses going over that information, the more points of risk there are of losing control of who has access to what bit of information that might be personal.
And for us, yeah, and it's also like using social media algorithms too, right? If like us and the organizations in Bloomfield and Garfield and Polish Hill are all sharing the same form, it goes wider, right? But the way this is getting to the limitations of using a Google form, but right now I have to manually, unless I'm going to share all of the information of Lawrenceville residents with all of our other partners, which gets into confidentiality stuff, I have to manually take something from Polish Hill and put it into a separate spreadsheet. So for that reason, that's another thing we're trying to work on with Create Lab, is that we could have one form that would limit, certain users would only have access to certain geographies, right? But I've just reached, so we were willing to continue to build out like the geography of ours, but we've just reached capacity. Like I can't, because of some of those technological limitations, we just can't do it anymore. So until we get that in place, but that I think would allow like one form to be used, everywhere. And then there's just so much resources flying around right now. And there's so much different, access to that information, that as much as we can make it simple, I think for everyone, that benefits everyone.
Great. I'm just going to ask one last, add to Nicholas's point. He thanks Sahin too, if you have to go. We really appreciate it. The last thing I'll say is Nicholas clarified too that, or he meant that we have a community response team and a buddy system on a small geography. They should be, I'm guessing they probably would make sense for them to combine efforts for the folks that have that, both those ideas, or have one, and maybe one is nascent and the other way, but are there thoughts? I know, because I asked that he had to leave, but they have a community response team, a kind of a FEMA formal community response team being created in Millvale, and maybe they're going to work on that together, and maybe that was directed at that, but I don't know if there's thoughts on that before we head out. No? Okay. Well, thank you both very much for attending, and Greg Porter said hello as well, to be my boss when I worked for Aetna. So just wanted to make sure I made that note. He had to leave early, but I just wanted to make sure I mentioned that he said hello. And a number of the people are saying thank you now. So thank you very much for that. I will share all that information out. And are you comfortable with us sharing your email addresses on when we share the information out there with the 50 attendees?
Absolutely.
Okay. And I'll double check with Zahin on that. And this will be a recording too. So for the question and answer portion, we can share that with folks. And thank you both. And thanks, Zahin, for helping us out with this and for doing the great work that you guys are doing.
You're welcome. We appreciate the opportunity.
Thanks for setting us up, Jim.
Thanks, Dave.